Hello everybody, and in this particular video we're going to be talking about cognitive skills and CLIL. We're going to look specifically at what content knowledge related to cognition and cognitive skills will be on your TKT CLIL test. So getting started right away, one of the most important things that you should brush up on or learn about before you take the CLIL test are the different taxonomies of cognitive skills. The most famous one is one by Bloom, Bloom's taxonomy. Christopher Bloom was a researcher, and in the 50s and 60s, he led a group of people who put together a taxonomy. And the version of the taxonomy you see now is a revised one. It's not the original one that was created by his team. But basically, what we're talking about here is the thinking skills or the cognitive skills that teachers need to focus on, according to this taxonomy, are divided into two groups: higher order thinking skills and lower order thinking skills. So if you go from the bottom up, remember, understand, and apply are lower order thinking skills. If students stay only at this level, they're not going to be able to internalize and personalize what they learn. For students to be able to do that, they need to move up to higher order thinking skills, which are analyze, evaluate, and create. Because when students can analyze, evaluate, and create something novel, new, that means that they know. That means they have learned. And that's the only way that students can provide evidence that they have really internalized concepts in the sense of personalizing them or interacting with them. And so you see here on this graph that you see or illustration, you have remember refers to recalling information. Understanding refers to explaining ideas, because if you can explain, that means that you understand. Apply refers to using information in new situations. Analyzing refers to drawing connections among ideas. Evaluate, justify a stand or a decision or a course of action. Creating means producing new or original work. So that serves to give us some guiding principles to understand each one of the levels. But it doesn't mean that they happen in this order, right? Depending on what you're teaching, depending on what you are doing, students may be able to analyze something before they can apply it or evaluate before they apply. It really depends. You can't just say that this works universally for everything that we're teaching or for all content knowledge. But it's a good guiding principle, and we're going to see what we can use it for. So for example, let's get some examples here of higher order thinking skills. So when students create, you ask them to make a logo for an environmental cause, and while focused on the same cause, they can create a flyer and a video for social media. Those are examples of creative output. Evaluating. The students can defend an argument in a debate, can correct a peer's word problems, can edit a peer's science report. Those are all examples of evaluation. Analyze, assess how good a budget is, if you're teaching math or economics. Label statements as true or false and explain. Compare different types of energy sources, right? Because when you are making comparison, you are as a byproduct of that analyzing. And for lower order thinking skills, we have apply, when students solve a math problem or conduct a chemical experiment. When they put paragraphs in order, organize facts in a timeline, or explain why plants need water, they are showing understanding of information, of concepts. And examples of remembering are spelling words, listing the steps of the water cycle, etc. So those are examples from different subjects that will help us get an idea of what they mean in practice. So let's see some applications of this. How is this operationalized? So one example is when you write objectives and when you develop sequences of activities for a lesson. So if I'm going to ask my students to recall, to recognize, to organize, outline, predict, design, create, or judge, it depends on what order I think this fall into my lesson. and in what order they make sense in a lesson. So that's very important. And also, I need to make sure that the activities are specifically designed for recalling, specifically designed for recognizing, for outlining, predicting. So this is one example. When you write lesson objectives, a lot of the verbs that we use today and that we are advised to use come from Bloom's taxonomy, because the verbs directly connect to one of the levels of Bloom's pyramid. Okay, so this is something to keep in mind. Another example is when we assess. So especially when we talk about bilingual teaching or CLIL, when we are assessing content and language. So let's suppose, for example, that I'm teaching a group that is limited in terms of language. And I'm still developing their language expertise in the target language, but they're knowledgeable of content. So I need to assess them in such a way that doesn't limit the expression of their knowledge, but doesn't put too high expectations on language, because they may not be able to write a paragraph yet. So all the questions that I've included here, they involve vocabulary use. Students need to know vocabulary, not necessarily writing sentences or developing full text. That would be more advanced language. So the first exercise, where you see the car and the students are required to label the car parts, that's a recall type of information. So I know my students, I cannot produce too much language, so I'm going to ask them, I'm going to lower the language demands. And in this case, the cognitive demands are low, because they're just recalling information. But when I move to the second exercise from another subject, the language demand is still low. I'm still checking understanding of vocabulary, but they're supposed to put the words harvesting maize, milk, seeds, water, weeding, which come from science, right, into the different processes there, or phases of a process, like inputs, processes, and outputs. So they need to analyze, they need to understand the words, they need to analyze them and answer the exercise. So I'm still keeping the language level low, at the vocabulary level, but I'm going up in terms of the cognitive demands of my assessment practice. So these are examples of how cognitive skills and understanding them, and understanding those types of taxonomies, can help you plan better lessons and be more precise when you are assessing. And if you want to learn a little bit more about CLIL, and especially preparing for the TKT CLIL course, I highly recommend these books. We've talked about them in another video, but those are good sources of information that I've used for some of the content in these videos, and that you should look into if you're interested in taking the TKT CLIL test. Thank you, and see you in the next video.